Hey everybody, this is Keith in LMC Garage. We're going to be doing some work on my personal 75 F-250 Super Cab. This is a Ranger XLT with a camper special package. I got this truck probably, 14, 15 years ago. Bought it on eBay. I was looking for something specific and had a long list of things that I wanted for it, a tow vehicle. This one checked all the boxes, so I went ahead and picked it up. Sight unseen, bought it, drove it across 3 states back home, and it's been a regular driver ever since. This one is very well equipped from the factory, just about all the options available. Factory 460, automatic, power steering, power brakes, air conditioning. It's got cruise control. 75 was the first year for factory cruise control in the trucks. Heck, it's got bedside toolbox, dual exhaust, swing out spare tire. It's got even factory air horns under the hood. It was very well equipped. And I've been driving this thing pretty regularly for the last, 14 years. However, the front suspension is starting to show some wear and tear. Driving this down the highway, taking it to car shows or just cruising or whatever, tends to wander around quite a bit. It's a chore to keep it between the lines, and that's mainly because the radius arm bushings are almost completely disintegrated. And so we're going to go ahead and replace those radius arms today. Since we're going to have the suspension out, we're going to replace the axle pivot bushings as well, tighten this front end up quite a bit, make it a lot more enjoyable to take it out on a daily drive. All right, we'll just take a quick look under the hood, just to kind of show you the engine and some of the features of this Ford. So here's the 460. It's actually still performing very well with, is it about 85,000 miles? Spits and sputters a little bit. I just did a tune-up to it, but I haven't adjusted timing yet. But like I said, very well equipped from the factory. It does have an Edelbrock intake and a Holley 4-barrel. It's the only changes made under the hood. You can see it's got the factory air horns. There's the tank. Now these air horns were vacuum operated. These aren't run by compressed air, it's run on vacuum, which is very odd for an air horn setup, but there it is. I'll go ahead and close the hood and get it up on the lift. So we got the truck up on the lift now, so we can kind of take a look at what we got to deal with. I mean, it's kind of dirty, it needs to get cleaned up a little bit, so that's what we'll be starting off with. But just to kind of give you, get you up to speed on why we're doing what we got to do. This is Ford's infamous twin I-beam front suspension. Came out in 1965. It replaced the solid steel axle that went side to side on all trucks. Starting in 65, they went with the twin I-beam, which made it an independent front suspension. So each side could move on its own. There were 2 axles. This was for the right wheel, this is for the left. And they could go over bumps individually and give you a smooth ride. In fact, their tagline for all through the late 60s and early 70s was work like a truck, ride like a car. And this front suspension, it allowed you to do that. Extremely rugged. But how this works is that on each side there's an axle that pivots right here. You got springs and shocks over here that dampen your suspension. And each side has its own independent spring, shock, axle. This actually makes for a very smooth ride. In addition to this axle, we have radius arm bushings along the side. So on the left-hand side, this is the radius arm for the left-hand axle. The purpose of this radius arm is to keep the axle from moving forward and backwards. Front axle is supposed to just do this. This radius arm prevents the axle from doing this too. It depends on the bushings that go into the frame. As you can see, these bushings are pretty well trashed out. That allows the front axle to be doing this, which affects your toe-in, your alignment, and makes it a chore to drive out on the highway. It becomes a two-handed job. So these bushings need to be replaced. Just to give you an idea what that's supposed to be, there's what we're putting in. So as you can see, it's in terrible shape. So we're going to be replacing the radius arm bushings, the axle pivot bushings, sway bar bushings. They're getting pretty cracked too. Notice that the brake lines are starting to get a little frayed. So as long as we're in here, we got to disconnect these anyway to drop the front suspension out. We're going to go ahead and replace the brake lines. All right, well, we're all done with the truck now, still up on the lift. We're gonna go ahead and take a moment to review what we've done, how we did it. Maybe we can cover some details that will help you and the next time you decide to do something similar to your project. So let's take a look. So when dropping this front end off, there's gonna be quite a few things here that have to be disconnected. So we went ahead and replaced these, remove a cotter pin and nut out up here. Don't necessarily need it to remove the sway bar, but we are replacing the sway bar bushings and the end links. So we have to completely remove the sway bar to get to all those. The end link has bushing installed from the factory. You don't need to worry about that, but the upper link bushings do come separate, so you will need to replace those. Coil spring strap up on top that needs to come off. You don't need to worry about the nut on the bottom of the coil spring that attaches it to the axle. Just drop it out of the way with the coil spring still attached, and you can remove the coil spring after it's on the ground. You will need to, once it's on the ground, remove the coil spring because you're going to be taking the axles in to a machine shop, unless you have access to your own press, to get those axle bushings pressed out and new ones pressed in. So anything holding the front suspension you need to go ahead and loosen up. Includes, like I said, the coil spring strap, shock absorbers, top and bottom. Because the string linkage goes through the radius arm, so you need to disconnect that. But the tie rods and everything else can be taken out as one unit. So you can remove the nut here, pop it off with a pickle fork. Same thing on the other side. And then disconnect the string linkage from the idler arm. And then you can just slide the whole thing out and drop it on the ground just to get it out of the way. If you are going to be replacing the string linkage while you're in this deep, be sure to count as you unscrew the pieces from each other. Count how many threads, how many turns you got to do, so that when you go to reinstall this, you can put it back in relatively the same position. Now, you will have to take it in and get a realignment done, but at least you're going to have it close enough that you could drive it a short distance to the alignment shop. And you also need to remove the brake hoses on each side. We're going to drop this down to the ground within a foot or so off the ground and finish removing the axles. You're doing this by yourself, even if you have a buddy to help. You're going to have to take the axles in to get the axle pivot bushings, which would be right here and right here. Those need to get pressed out. If you got a press in your garage, you can go ahead and do it yourself. Most people don't. So you're going to need to take those axles into a machine shop, have them press new ones in. You're going to need to remove all your brake hardware. Take a bunch of pictures to remind yourself how everything goes together before you start dismantling, and go ahead and remove all the brake hardware from the axle. It's also a good time to contemplate or to consider replacing your kingpins. Kingpins are pressed in. You might get lucky banging them out in the garage with a hammer and a drift pin. More than likely, you're going to want to get that professionally pressed out too. They can press out the old kingpins, put new kingpins in as well. So once everything's disconnected and you're ready to take the axle bolts out, you will go ahead and take them out. It's not immediately going to drop out of the way because it's kind of wedged in there. So you're going to likely need your buddy and a pry bar and a long screwdriver and half a dozen other tools. And just pry this end out of the bracket on both sides. It will drop out. Just be sure you don't have any body parts under it because it is heavy as heck. So once you get your axles back from the machine shop, you got your new kingpins pressed in, you got your axle pivot bushings pressed in, and you're ready to start putting things back together. The rest of the assembly is pretty much the opposite of what you did taking it out. You'll need to, obviously, because you disconnected the brake lines, you'll need to do a full bleed, get all the air out of the lines, make sure everything goes in the same position. That's where taking pictures before you start disassembling is really going to help out, because you likely will forget how things went back together in the day or two that your truck was apart, and you're going to rely on those pictures. So after driving the truck for a few weeks on the street now, after doing all the work that we did to the underside, I can report that it is driving much better. It doesn't track quite as wildly out on the highway as it did. I do still need to take it in and get an alignment done. It still wanders a little bit, but it's 100% better than it was. And I'm fairly certain that once we get an alignment done, it'll be perfect. Hope you learned, hope you enjoyed watching this video. Give us a thumbs up, like us on Facebook and follow, and we'll see you next time.